Hi there. So today we're going to show how to do rivets, and the couple rivets that I'm going to show you how to do are the standard rivets, which is this one and this one. The fine silver rivets I'll show in another video, and then one of these, this one, is actually a hidden rivet, and so when you flip it over on the other side you can't see it at all. So I'm going to show how to do that one as well. I'm also going to show how to do a tube rivet where it can just go through the materials just like normal here. And I'm going to show how to do a tube rivet with spacers. And so you can see that that there's space in between and it's kind of like sitting up on a shelf. So things to get started, you're going to need your material. We are going to use wire. In this particular case, I just have a piece of copper wire. For the tube rivets, we're going to use tubing, and then also for the spacers, we're going to need telescoping tubing. So it needs to fit in really nice and tight and slide in like so. So the wire could be any material, brass, nickel, silver, depending on what you're working with. Remember that the copper is the softest, so it moves the easiest. So the thicker the gauge of the wire, the more that I would lead to copper rivets, because it'll be even easier to hammer those. So the idea of those rivets are going to be that we don't want to use any fire period for our work. So let's go ahead and get started. So to get started, I'm going to need to drill a hole. I'm going to use my flex shaft for the demonstration, but I showed in class, I showed how to use the drill press. It's going to be a lot easier to work with the drill press and keep it nice and accurate. So the first thing that I need is a a drill bit gauge plate, and that is stored near our drill bits. And then I need to take my wire material and see what size it is. And so in this particular one, this is 16 gauge metal, and it is a 55 drill bit. And then I take the non-cutting part of my drill bit, put it in there, and then there's my 55 drill bit. So I always suggest starting with your material first, and then generally you usually have a kit of all of the drill bits. So start with the material first. So I'm going to go ahead and drill some starter holes here for this material. And again, I would do this at the drill press normally, but I wanted to be able to show everything in one spot. It's easier to use the drill press just because you could start with a little center punch divot, and then the drill press, it'll grab onto the material really easily. So normally I would have this measured and know exactly where my holes are going to be, and then go for it. So if you start with really low RPMs, it'll keep the bit from skating. And then I'm going to go ahead and drill the other hole. And you could drill into your bench pin, but I'm kind of drilling right off to the side of it. And you do see that I put my safety glasses on. So safety glasses on, make sure you have your hair back and you don't have anything that could get caught in your flex shaft. Okay, so step one, I'm gonna just get the burrs off of the back. Now, when you are riveting something together, it might be your last step or even like your second to last step. So really be careful whenever you're cutting things apart or taking off burrs. You know, you're going to be sanding these pieces really fine well before you rivet them. So keep your sequence in mind. So I'm going to go ahead and drill these next ones. You see that I'm just kind of keeping straight up and down. Sometimes I like to put the material through so that it holds it in place so that I can assure that I'm going to get the next one in the right place. Okay. So we have both of those holes drilled. Again, I'm going to knock the burrs off. Okay, so we are ready to set the rivets at this point. I'm going to use two different hammers so that you can kind of see how both of them work with riveting. One of them is a cross peen hammer, which this one's called a riveting hammer, so this end is a cross peen. This is really good, especially for the flush rivets. And then the other hammer that I'm going to pick is a chasing hammer. And we have the ball peen end here, and that's going to spread the metal in all directions. If you use a chasing hammer, I usually designate one or two hammers as finishing hammers, chasing hammers. So we have them all polished and buffed and cleaned up on the ends. So I am ready to start riveting. So I've got my little rivets sitting here. Again, I would still do this on the edge of the anvil if you have one, just because there's just a little bit more force coming up. But you can certainly work on just a block like I have here, just a steel block. So it's a little bit awkward to get those set in place, but I do like to try to get them both set in place, and then I'm going to set the rivet. So I'm holding this rivet in my hand so that it doesn't fall. And setting the rivet, I have the rivet about halfway up, and so the sheet metal is not sitting all the way on the bench block, and I'm just hitting over the top, and I'm just getting it to set in place, setting the rivet. And so again, there's still force on the back side, so I've just set the rivet there. So on this one, I'll go ahead and use the chasing hammer for the standard rivet just to show you how it works, and I'm just kind of hitting around all of the sides of the rivet to get it to kind of mushroom over. And there's all kinds of decorative rivets that you can do. You could leave it just like this, which is kind of the traditional rivet, or you can flatten it out a little bit more. Try to avoid hitting your metal at all. Obviously, it would be all probably finished and maybe even patinated and waxed before you even rivet. So sometimes this could be your very last step. So that one's done. A standard rivet. This one I'll go ahead and use the riveting hammer with the cross peen so that you can see how it works. So I'm going to go with the cross peen going one way, which has created an oval shape, and then I'm going to go with the cross peen going the other way. If you are going to do a flush rivet, you need to make sure that it's a surface that you can fully sand and file. So you don't want to do a flush rivet on a texture. And this is already really set on the back. I'm going to just really stretch that circle all the way over that shelf that we made. And then I'm going to hit it down. This is slightly domed, so I am still kind of tilting the hammer just a little bit to make sure that that rivet material is going down. Okay, so the standard rivet is done. You know, you can make sure that its edges are knocked down so that if it's on jewelry, you don't accidentally snag it on anything. You can do all kinds of little finishes to it. You could get a stone setting tool to flatten it a little bit more if it's in a hard to reach place, but that one's done. The hidden rivet Now all I need to do is I need to file and I need to sand. So sometimes I'll use my flex shaft to get after this a little bit quickly. For those of you that are in my class, you don't usually start with the flex shaft for a while, because we need to learn how to sand and file by hand first, so that you don't accidentally tear it apart with your flex shaft. So, but for this, just so that we can kind of speed it up, I'll use my flex shaft, and I'm just preparing a sanding disc here. And wear a dust mask whenever you're using the flex shaft as well, and then your safety glasses. Just like if I was sanding this by hand, I want to sand in a couple different directions. And so the only thing that's holding that rivet up now is that little false shelf that I drilled in. So if you didn't push your material enough with the hammer, you could have your rivet fall out. Or if you didn't make a shelf period, your rivet would just fall out at this point. So the only thing holding it up is that shelf. So that is pretty beautiful. I have one little shadow that's probably more from mishitting with my hammer than it is the actual rivet. Like, I got some texture here from... Okay. So that looks great. And there's my hidden rivet somewhere in there. It's hidden. So you can see where it is from the back, but there it is somewhere in there. I still have just a little bit more sanding to do. So there's the standard rivet and the hidden rivet, or sometimes called the flush rivet.